Hey, good morning. I'm Vicki White in for Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers right now on Morning News Now. Fueling frustration, a growing struggle for millions of Americans. With inflation still at record highs this morning, gas prices soaring in several states, forcing drivers to cut back when they fill up.
I'm supposed to be putting premium in my truck now, but I got to put regular in it. You know, and then that's throwing everything off because I can't afford premium.
I mean, we're literally working just to put gas in our cars, and it's just not working for anybody.
And while new inflation numbers are signaling some relief may be on the way, the president sharing his plan to bring all those rising costs back down. We'll bring you the latest. Blocked. New developments in the fight over abortion rights in America. A long-shot bill to keep abortion legal nationwide officially fails in the Senate. Plus, more protests over the possible end of Roe v. Wade. We'll have more on the fallout, plus what it all means ahead of the midterm elections. Reduced to rubble, breaking overnight, a fast-moving fire ripping through an upscale California community. Right now, evacuations underway in Orange County, where several million-dollar homes have already been destroyed. We'll bring you the latest on the fight to contain the flames. And changing the GameStop. It's been more than a year since Reddit users sent GameStop shares soaring. Now we're getting a look at how it all went down. We'll talk to someone featured in a new NBC News Studios film all about the stock surge that changed Wall Street.
So much hocus pocus. It's really interesting to hear the backstory on that.
And do you remember how we all could not stop talking about it? We were covering it 24/7 because it was such an amazing story. It really was. So the documentary is very, very cool, and we'll bring it part of that conversation in a little bit this morning. Begin, though, with the impact of rising prices everywhere and the pain that's causing millions of Americans.
Yeah, the new April numbers revealing that inflation still remains close to a 40-year high. And you've likely noticed just about everything costs more now, from the grocery store to the gas pump. According to AAA, the average price of a regular gallon of gas, I mean, do we even want to talk about this? It's $4.42. To put that into perspective, that's up 18 cents from just a week ago and more than $1.40 from last year. One of the states really feeling the pinch is Georgia. It ranks 7th of all states in miles driven by residents per year. And that is where we find NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber. She's in Gainesville, Georgia. Ellison, great to see you. Good morning. Over the past few years, Georgia has been at the center of the political universe. What are people there saying about the rising cost of gas, and who do they blame?
Yeah, I mean, they are incredibly frustrated. You talked about it. The national gas average today for the country is $4.42. Here in Georgia, the average this morning, $3.95. We went to 3 different politically significant but politically different counties to try and get a sense of what voters here think about all of this. We went to DeKalb County first. That's a solidly blue county that Democrats focus on to try and get high turnout. Then we went to Gwinnett County. That's a really important swing county these days. Then we came here to Hall County, which is a solidly red county that Republicans need and want high turnout in. As we spoke to people in all 3 counties, every single person told us they are frustrated with the prices that they're seeing at the pump and in the grocery store. They say they feel like it is not sustainable. Something needs to change. But when we ask them who or what is to blame, the answer is different. Listen.
Well, if the Republicans were in office, we wouldn't have this problem. That's the way I feel. I'm a Republican. Make this a political issue.
I don't think it's Biden's fault. I feel like it's just like because like of Russia and like how they control a lot of the oil and stuff like that.
Who do we pick? Who do with political issues? Do you pick this person because even though they got some great issues, but they're not wanting to deal with, the major issue of gas right now? Or do you pick the person that's going to deal with the gas issue, but then you don't like the rest of his issue?
Okay, so bear with me for a second because I'm going to try and do a little bit of math. We were talking to a gas station, a business owner yesterday. He owned, 1 or 2 gas stations. And he said, look, this is actually really bad for me as a business owner as well. He said the prime price that he was paying to buy a gallon of gas from Chevron was $3.37. He said he has to pay about 31 cents in federal taxes. In Georgia, the excise tax, that's gone at least until the end of the month. The governor suspended that. He said then there's also sales tax, not not to mention that you have to pay the guy or the person who delivers the gas. So he says they're paying roughly $3.68 a gallon. He was selling it at $3.89. He said typically right now they're only seeing a profit margin of somewhere between 10 and 12 cents per gallon, and they're actually really relying on the things they're selling inside the stores to make a profit. So he was saying, all in all, he's hearing from customers they're frustrated. He said he's frustrated as well. Vicki?
Well, Georgia also has a Senate seat on the ballot this November, and in a state that has a notorious traffic issue, infrastructure issues. What are the candidates saying they're going to do to fix these problems?
Yeah, the question is this going to be a campaign issue? When you talk to Republicans, they say, yes, absolutely. The leading Republican Senate hopeful right now, Herschel Walker, in a statement from his campaign given to NBC News, he said this, quote, President Biden and Senator Warnock have managed to destroy the U.S. economy in just 16 months. I'm hearing from Georgia voters who say they didn't know a vote for Senator Warnock would cost them an extra 8.3% inflation tax on everything. These policies don't just happen, he says. They are a direct result of President Biden and Senator Warnock canceling the Keystone Pipeline, shipping American jobs overseas, and recklessly spending money we don't have. Senator Raphael Warnock, the incumbent Senate Democrat, his campaign told us this, quote, Reverend Warnock is laser focused on lowering cost for hardworking families all across the state. He is leading the fight to freeze the gas tax, cap the cost of insulin, and bring down the cost of prescription drugs, while also holding big corporations that are making record profits accountable for price gouging. I was talking to a source with Herschel Walker's campaign, and they told us they believe for Republicans heading into the general election, which right now it looks like the candidate will most likely be Herschel Walker based on the polls, they say they feel like gas prices are the main issue in Georgia and something they will focus heavily on in a general election. Vicki?
Alice and Barbara, good to see you. First time I've seen you since you got married, so congratulations.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, as we mentioned, and you're probably noticing, it's not just gas that's more expensive. The cost of food, cars, and electricity have all soared, and Americans are having a hard time making ends meet as a result. NBC News business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent has more on the economic fallout.
President Biden focusing on American farmers in his latest attempt to bring down food prices.
Right now, America is fighting on two fronts. At home, it's inflation and rising prices. Abroad, it's helping Ukrainians defend their democracy.
In April, inflation went up 8.3% compared to last year. The cost of rent, food, airfares, and new vehicles drove up prices. The president visiting an Illinois farm offering a new plan, which in part expands crop insurance for farmers who harvest two crops in the same field. Missouri mother of two, Megan Kaiser, feels it at the supermarket, with grocery prices up nearly 11% compared to last year.
You can kind of see that things are moving and just everything feels more expensive.
She feels it on the road, with gas prices soaring even higher.
When you're at the pump, you're thinking, okay, when is it going to stop rolling, right?
And she and her husband, Mark, also feel it on their family farm, where the cost of fertilizer has skyrocketed.
How much were you paying last year for nitrogen versus now?
So last year it was around $270 per ton, and now it's over $1,400 per ton.
What does that do to your budget and your ability to survive?
Well, it's scary.
Although the corn and soybeans they grow are selling at higher prices right now, Kaiser says the rising price of what goes into the crops put the family business at risk.
Everything's higher. Equipment's higher, land is higher, seed costs are up.
What is President Biden going to do to reduce inflation for American farmers who are helping to produce what we eat and what we serve on our kitchen tables?
It's a great question. First, he's doubling federal funding for fertilizer to try to get more fertilizer out to the farms that need it. Second, he's going to use precision agricultural techniques to help our farmers actually increase their crop production.
Despite inflation, President Biden's top economic advisor, Brian Deese, says the administration is also aware corporations have been bringing in record profits.
So one of our key focus has been, where can we encourage more competition, particularly by having more small businesses, more entrepreneurs come into a market, help to innovate and disrupt. That's not only good for our economy, but it will help bring prices down as well.
Prices that Megan Kaiser has to pay to get through this season ahead.
We're going to work some longer hours and be a little less comfortable for a while.
All right, thanks to Jolene Kemp for that report. Now, one other sector that's been hit hard by inflation, airfare. Prices are soaring. If you've tried to schedule a vacation, I'm sure you've seen over 18% just in the past month. That's the fastest rise on record.
Yeah, I felt it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now to the fight over abortion rights. The Senate has failed to advance a bill that would have protected the right to a legal abortion. The vote was in response to last week's leaked Supreme Court opinion that indicated Roe versus Wade would be overturned. The Women's Health Protection Act, it passed the House, but on the Senate floor, it fell far short of the 60 senators needed to break a filibuster. All 50 Republicans, along with Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, voted against the bill. Vice President Kamala Harris was in the Senate chambers as that vote failed.
The Senate failed to stand in defense of a woman's right to make decisions about her own body.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa joins me now. Good morning, Ali. This legislation, we knew it was basically doomed from the start, right? Democrats wanted everyone on the record, but it wasn't going to have enough votes to pass. There was still a fiery debate on the Senate floor, though. So walk us through what happened.
Yeah, Vicki, good morning. As you mentioned, this bill was likely doomed from the start, but that doesn't make it any less consequential. And you really got a sense of that even before the voting started on this bill yesterday. You had House Democrats who were pro-choice marching to the floor of the Senate, chanting, "My body, my decision." Some of these lawmakers even choosing to stay within the chamber up in the gallery seating during this vote. You had Vice President Harris, as you mentioned, brought in to cast a tie-breaking vote if needed. But at the end of the day, Democrats did not have the votes from the beginning to get this done, nor did they have the votes to pass a filibuster, a GOP-led filibuster, to get it done either. So this was largely a symbolic vote. It really gave Democratic senators an opportunity to use this high-profile moment to really deliver emotional speeches, powerful speeches about the impact this could have on women going forward if Roe is indeed overturned. Listen to how Senate Majority and Minority leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell reacted to the vote yesterday.
For MAGA Republicans, this has always been about making abortion illegal everywhere.
Democrats' radical bill is as extreme gets.
And Vice President Harris, you played a little bit of that clip at the top there. She mentioned after the vote that this really makes it clear that the Senate does not align with where the majority of the American people stand on abortion rights and reproductive rights, Vicki.
Well, Ali, as we mentioned, Senator Joe Manchin was the lone Democrat to vote against this bill with the Republicans. What did he say about his reasoning?
Yeah, and he was actually the last vote cast on the Senate floor. And it's not that much of a surprise because this is exactly how he voted when this bill was proposed and brought to the floor earlier this year. But he said that while he is indeed pro-choice, he is indeed pro-codifying Roe v. Wade, this bill that was voted on yesterday was just a little too broad for him. Listen to what he had to say.
I was hopeful that the Democratic Party, having control of the agenda, would put a piece of legislation forward that would codify Roe v. Wade. 70% of the American public wants Roe v. Wade to be codified, as has been precedented law for 50 years. The bill we have today to vote on, the Women's Health Protection Act, and I respect people who support, but make no mistake, it is not Roe v. Wade codification.
And Manchin was also asked yesterday what his vote means for his party in the grand scheme of things, where he stands within his party. And he simply said that he understands he doesn't fit the mold. And that's just who he is, Vicki. And that's what we've seen time and time again as he continues to kind of break with his party.
Yeah, this isn't the first time we've seen that with Joe Manchin. All right, Ali, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Breaking overnight, a fast-moving wildfire tore through a number of multi-million-dollar homes in Southern California near the famous coastal town of Laguna Beach. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is on the ground in Laguna Niguel with the latest. Hey, Miguel, good morning.
Good morning. Considering the size of this wildfire, it was fairly destructive. On this one block alone, we're told about a dozen homes were destroyed. Now, this fire is still, for the most part, contained, but crews are worried about hot embers flying through the air, and that could spark a new fire. But when so many folks return home, this is what they'll find. Raging off California's pristine coastline, it wasn't the size but the sheer power of this volatile wildfire that caught even veteran firefighters by surprise. Within minutes, some 24 multi-million-dollar estates were incinerated in the gated hills near famed Laguna Beach.
It seems like a war zone out here.
Fueled by a dangerous combination of powerful 30-mile-an-hour ocean winds and bone-dry drought conditions, this inferno only torched some 200 acres, but it moved at breakneck speed.
We're seeing spread in ways that we haven't before. Again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, fire like that might have grown to an acre, couple acres. We'd gotten there very quickly.
Starting as a small brush fire in the early afternoon, in just a few hours, the blaze sprinted uphill, surrounding, then engulfing sprawling properties perched in the mountains.
Memories, yeah, they're all gone.
The threat looming for hours, even after nightfall. Despite the level of destruction here, crews say the damage could have been so much worse. They're now trying to stop embers from going from one rooftop to another. In conditions like these, it's a miracle, say firefighters, that nobody was injured or killed. Fast evacuations save lives. The true extent of the damage still unclear.
I'm in disbelief right now, and I can just, when things can happen in an instant, it's unbelievable.
With the West already facing a dangerously fast start to fire season, due in part to climate change, this morning, California's beauty and Mother Nature's fury colliding in a fast-moving fire that took homes, but thankfully spared lives. Overnight, conditions here improved dramatically. For the most part, those winds have died down, but that may not be the case over the next 24 to 48 hours. So this continues to be a big concern here that new spot fires could erupt. The good news here, only about 20 homes have been lost. This community is very densely populated. It could have been so much worse. Guys, back to you.
All right, Miguel Almaguer, thank you so much.
Let's go ahead and get a closer look at those conditions in California. We were just talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, Michelle Grossman is here in studio with us. We sure were, and look at that, right overnight.
I know. And you guys, it's so scary. He mentioned 20 homes, but there were 100 in its path.
Yeah.
And this started so fast, and it's really unique. So let's talk about it for a second before I get to the graphics. Normally in Southern California, Savannah, you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
You get those Santa Ana winds, those dry, warm winds. This was a cool wind off the Pacific Ocean. So this is very typical for this time of year, that wind. It was a 30-mile-per-hour wind, just started these fires because we are so dry. So let's tell you what's happening right now and what we can expect this afternoon. Miguel kind of said it perfectly. We saw the winds die down this morning. We're looking at cool conditions, really, 47 degrees. Relative humidity isn't all that low, but as we go throughout the afternoon hours, we're going to see the winds picking up once again. We put a contour over it. That's indicating where we're going to see 25-mile-per-hour winds once again. Again, it was only 30 miles per hour yesterday, but we are so dry. In fact, 34% of the West is in an extreme drought, and that's not going to get any better as we go throughout the next, let's say, 6, 7, 8 months. We need to get some good rain in here. We started out the season really good, but not so much after that. So here's the drought monitor. Again, 34% of the West in an extreme drought. And when you look at the statistics, California had the driest January to April on record. And when we're looking at rainfall, we are in the teens compared to normal. So Los Angeles, 19% compared to normal. San Francisco, 16%, and Long Beach. Here is what we're looking at today. Red flag warning, 6 million again under a red flag warning. Again, it only takes one little spark to start these raging wildfires because we have the winds in place and because we are so bone dry. The low humidity is in place too. So Denver, Pueblo, down to Clayton, you are into a critical risk. Now, as we're talking about other big stories, that's a big story today, but we are also under a severe threat again in the upper Midwest. We had tornadoes yesterday. We're going to see the threat for that once again today. 10 million at risk. We could see really large hail once again, winds gusting to 70 miles per hour and tornadoes. And then as we go throughout tomorrow, we're going to see that shifting to the east. So you guys, it feels like it's on repeat, right? That same story. We're not getting a break. It's day after day. Everything's lasting a little longer.
Yeah, and it is just so crazy to, in the same weather forecast, talk about 2-inch hail and talk about these wildfires. There's just so much going on across the country.
And then snow in the west, in the higher elevations.
Yeah,
Keeps you busy for sure, Michelle.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. We'll see you next hour. Now let's get to some breaking news out of Europe, which could have a major impact on the war in Ukraine. This morning, Finland's president and prime minister have issued a joint statement expressing their desire to apply for NATO membership, quote, without delay. Now, Russia sees NATO expansion as a threat and has warned of consequences if historically neutral countries like Finland, like Sweden, join the alliance. Speaking yesterday alongside Britain's Prime Minister, Finland's president said Russia would only have itself to blame if his country does join NATO.
We would like to maximize our security in way or another while thinking membership in NATO. When you ask how they see possible Finnish joining, well, if that would be the case that we join, well, my response would be that you caused this. Look at the mirror.
NBC News senior national correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Lviv. That's in western Ukraine. Jay, thanks for being with us. So we'll get to the latest on the ground there in Ukraine in just a moment. But first, let's start with this potential NATO expansion. So the Finnish president, as we just heard, just mentioned security there. That's, of course, Article 5. We've talked so much about this, that collective defense clause within NATO. But this is a historically neutral country. So how big of a step would this be? And how is Moscow taking this?
Yeah, it is a big deal, and I can tell you that even on the ground here, people are talking about this move. Look, remember that they share about an 800-mile border with Russia, and since the invasion, in public polls, the question of joining NATO has gone from 30% positive to over 80% at this point. So clearly, it's had some effect on how they feel about their security. Let's get to a joint statement from both the president and the prime minister. In that statement, they say NATO membership would strengthen Poland's security. As a member of NATO, Finland would strengthen the entire defense alliance. Finland must apply for NATO membership without delay. We hope that the national steps, sorry, I'm having a little breakup here, still needed to make the decision will be taken rapidly within the next few days. So they want to move this along as quickly as possible. Russia has responded, and they've talked about this in the past, warned about this, saying that there would be, and these are their words, consequences if the nation was to join NATO.
There's a lot to watch for there as that unfolds. Obviously, a dramatic shift on the international stage if it were to happen. Now let's talk about what's going on there in Ukraine. So we're again watching Mariupol and that besieged steel plant where those wounded soldiers are holed up. We're hearing, no medical supplies, amputees. It just seems like just such a terrible situation within those walls. Now, we understand Ukraine has been in talks to get them out, has proposed a deal to Russia. Tell us a little bit about that and the situation there. Is there a possibility they will get out soon?
Well, there seems to be no movement back and forth. We do know that Ukraine has offered to trade war criminals for those who are injured to allow them to leave. The UN has been negotiating for weeks trying to get those injured soldiers out of that steel plant. To this point, there's just been no movement from the Russian side. They refuse to have a temporary peace treaty there to move these soldiers out. And you described it perfectly. I mean, they're in this area, many of them with severe wounds. There's no medical care, no doctors, no medicine, no wraps that are sterilized. So they're in desperate need of help there. What we do know on the ground is that troops have now sealed off underground exits from that steel plant, and they're moving tanks into the region.
Lots to watch for there. Now, I also do quickly want to ask you before I let you go about an occupied southern city. It's Kherson, and that's because this could be a look at what's to come. Because yesterday, Russian appointed authorities in the city said they plan to ask that this city be annexed. That's something they're asking of Moscow, of Putin. Now, on the Ukrainian side, an advisor to the president did tweet and compare this essentially to asking to join Mars or Jupiter, basically dismissing this. But what does this mean? What could happen here?
Yeah. Well, it was the first city to fall, and Russian occupiers are the ones saying this. They plan to appeal to Vladimir Putin personally, directly, to say that it's time to annex this area. They say by the end of the year that Kherson will be under Russian law. The Kremlin seems kind of cold on the idea. They have put out an official statement. I want to read part of it here. It basically says it's up to the residents of Kherson to determine their own fate.
All right, Jay Gray, as always, we so appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much.
For more on Ukraine, we're going to bring in Joe Cirincione. He's a distinguished fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Good morning, Joe. Let's start with Finland and its plans to join NATO. One of the reasons Putin invaded Ukraine was to prevent the expansion of NATO on Russia's borders. Now we see that Russia could potentially have NATO troops and weapons, as Jay talked about, along the 800-mile border that it shares with Finland. What kind of response do you expect from Russia if Finland does indeed join the alliance?
Well, Vladimir Putin has threatened, and I quote, severe military and political consequences if Finland should join NATO. Practically speaking, though, there's not much he can do to stop this from happening besides his political bluster. Russian forces have invaded Finland many times over the centuries. The Finnish are well aware of this. For 77 years now, they have thought that their main security was coming from neutrality, from non-alignment, being neither part of the Russian or Soviet bloc or the NATO bloc. The invasion of Ukraine has dramatically changed their thinking. As Jay said, 6 months ago, only 20% of the Finnish people supported joining NATO. Now that is well over 80%. The decision has been made at the highest levels. We expect on Monday that the parliament will debate and vote on this, and it should take place probably within this year. Both Sweden and Finland will formally join the NATO alliance, greatly strengthening that military alliance.
Yeah, that is a dramatic change from 20% to 80% public approval. You talked about it. Sweden also considering joining NATO. These two Nordic nations have this long history of neutrality, but as we heard the Finland leader saying, you know, Russia, look in the mirror. If you want to know why this country is going to join, it's because of you. What does this mean for the world? Does it make the world a safer place?
I think it does. Having these very powerful militaries, Finland and Sweden have very strong militaries on their own, and now bringing them into NATO and having that kind of resources consolidated helps deter Russian aggression. I mean, that's the main point. NATO has always been a defensive alliance, first against the Soviet Union and now increasingly over Russia. I got to tell you, whatever Putin thought was going to happen when he invaded Ukraine, that he would quickly occupy that he would use that as sort of a wedge to split NATO, it's completely backfired. It's exactly the opposite. NATO is more unified now than at any time since in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when they rallied to defend the United States. It's growing stronger, not weaker. You know, Putin has created the very military and political nightmare he was trying to avoid.
And this would be a significant expansion if these two Nordic countries join. Earlier this week, Joe, Ukraine's foreign minister said the country's military goals have evolved since the war began. Now, instead of just reclaiming the territory it lost, it wants to recover all the Ukrainian spaces that Russia has occupied since 2014. Is that a real possibility? And what's a realistic goal for the Ukrainians at this point before I let you go?
That would be a heavy lift. I understand why they want to do that. Of course, every nation would want to expel the foreign invaders, would like to get their land back. But I think it's more realistic to think that Ukraine can push the Russian forces back to the lines they held before the war, that is February 24th. As the U.S. artillery that we're giving them moves in, as they're getting more and better equipment, I think the likelihood is that Ukraine can push the Russian forces back, but push them all the way out, push them out of Crimea, that may be a bridge too far.
Joe Cirincione, we appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, more than 500 million cases worldwide and counting.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll bring you the latest in the fight against COVID as President Biden prepares to speak at the second ever global COVID-19 summit. This is Morning News Now.
This morning, the second ever COVID-19 Global Summit will take place with President Biden expected to speak.
Yeah, it's a virtual event, and it's happening as COVID, of course, is still a worldwide challenge. According to the latest numbers from NBC News and Johns Hopkins University, more than 500 million COVID cases have been reported, and more than 6.2 million people have died. Joining us is Dr. Mario Ramirez. He's an emergency physician and the former Pandemic and Emerging Threats Coordinator in the Office of Global Affairs. Doctor, always great to have you with us. So let's talk through this summit. One of the big objectives here, according to the White House, is, quote, recommitting intensity to global response. We've seen this recent spike in cases around the world. We're seeing it here at home, but then also particularly in places like South Africa and Shanghai and China. What do you think should be the top priority here as these world leaders come together?
Well, good morning, Savannah. Thanks for having me back. I think that the key points for this summit, and I think are the right ones, which is to say that we've got to continue to sort of refocus the world's attention on the pandemic. It's not over, unfortunately, but we've got to continue to drive vaccination around the world. Unfortunately, we did not meet the goal of the first summit to vaccinate 70% of the world's population, and we still have a lot of work to go there. And so that's going to be a big focus. It's also really important, though, that I think we work to expand access to testing and especially to treatment. There are a lot of new medicines that have come onto the market since the last summit, but access to those medicines is still really limited in much of the world. And it's clear that we're not going to vaccinate our way out of additional cases in the future. And so we've got to expand access to those treatments. And then the last thing I think we've got to do is we've got to create some structure that's going to better protect the world for future threats.
Doctor, let's talk about COVID boosters and older Americans. I was surprised by this statistic. According to the CDC, about 1 in 3 Americans who are 65 or older, they got their initial vaccinations, but they actually haven't gotten a first booster. How risky is that?
Well, it's becoming a bigger problem, Vicki. What the data would show is that people are really well protected after their third dose. And in fact, the primary series really should be 3 doses. And that's one of the first things that we really have to do. I think the CDC has to change this definition of what they call fully vaccinated to really reflect the fact that people need 3 doses of this vaccine. But the data also shows that as you move further out from that third dose, typically 4 to 6 months, that your potential for getting reinfected, and if you're an older American, your risk of having a serious outcome goes up significantly. And that's really where we have failed in this country. We have failed to impart a sense of urgency that people need to get that third shot, and they need to get a 4th shot when they become eligible.
It's interesting. We hear so much from doctors about kind of failing in the messaging, not, with the shots themselves or anything like that. Doctor, quickly before I let you go, I do want to ask you about this new report, especially as we head into summer, from researchers that suggest that smaller indoor events are more likely to spread COVID compared to larger outdoor gatherings. Now, it's not really a surprise given the emphasis that we've heard on the safety of being outdoors versus indoors. But can you tell us a little bit about these findings? I mean, what group sizes are we talking about, and what should people keep in mind as we head into summer?
Yeah, the study that you're talking about, Savannah, was a study conducted down in Austin where they took a look at large public health gatherings, typically in the tens of thousands size, and compared that to smaller indoor gatherings. And they found that the rate and the risk of transmission was higher in smaller settings. And as you said, that's not too surprising, but I would say, that it's a little more nuanced than that, and that it really is contextual, because it depends on how many cases are out there circulating in the community. And in particular, it also depends on whether you're taking the preventive measures before the event. Are you testing people before they come? Are you requiring them to be vaccinated? And in particular, what are the ventilation settings that you're using for that indoor event? There are ways that we can really drive down the risk of having smaller indoor gatherings to help make those things much safer. And so it's important to contextualize those things and realize that this isn't a static risk, and it's going to continue to fluctuate based on the local conditions.
Yeah. Do a rapid test and open some windows. Yeah. Right? Dr. Ramirez, thank you so much. Always great to see you. Now, coming up on Morning News Now, final words, what we're learning from 911 calls made by an ex-corrections officer at the center of that nationwide manhunt in the moments before she died.
Plus, new concerns and calls for an investigation after the killing of a journalist on assignment in the occupied West Bank. We'll be right back. We're back with new information this morning about the final moments of Vicki White's life. The former Alabama corrections officer's last words were recorded in 911 calls that were released to the public yesterday. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from Evansville, Indiana. Hey, Megan, good morning.
Vicki, good morning to you. Yeah, this was an 11-day manhunt. This corrections officer taking a dangerous inmate from her Alabama jail. That chase ending here in Indiana. And now we're learning new information about the detail leading up to what happened in the moments that they were captured.
This morning, newly released 911 calls revealing the chaotic final moments inside the speeding car of Alabama fugitives Vicki White and Casey White.
911.
Everybody's going to go off and kill us.
Vicki's panicked voice urging the suspected murderer to flee on foot as authorities close in.
Everybody's going on. Let's get out and run.
Sirens can be heard in the background as 911 operators try to communicate with the pair.
Hello?
But Vicki never responding to them. Seconds later, what sounds like a crash and a gunshot heard on the line.
I'm going to go for the gun.
Officers found the gun still in Vicki's hands. An autopsy later confirming she took her own life.
What do you make of that 911 call?
I think she thought she was going to be apprehended. I think she was probably thinking in her head, I've got to go back and face my fellow employees, the sheriff, people of the community.
The whole incident is shocking to all of us here.
Jason Butler worked with Vicki throughout her 17-year career as a corrections officer and says their coworkers are distraught.
Very knowledgeable of her job, well-liked, well-respected by colleagues and inmates.
Meanwhile, the suspected murderer she apparently risked it all for remains locked inside a state prison. Casey White now having to answer for yet another charge, and an entire community is left with the unanswered question why this seemingly dedicated employee would help a dangerous inmate escape.
Yeah, now keep in mind, Casey White is also facing a murder charge for a stabbing death of a 58-year-old woman back in 2015. He's due back in court next month for that. But if he's convicted, he does face the possibility of getting sentenced to death. Back to you.
Megan Fitzgerald in Evansville, Indiana for us. Thank you.
Now, the UN Secretary General has called for an independent investigation after a highly respected Al Jazeera correspondent, Shireen Abu Akleh, was shot dead while reporting in the occupied West Bank. The broadcaster says she was assassinated by Israeli forces, an accusation Israel denies. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez has more on her death.
This video capturing the moments right after a veteran Palestinian-American journalist was killed while covering an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank. Gunfire ringing out as her colleagues rushed to her side. Shireen Abu Akleh, an American citizen, was known across the Middle East for her coverage on Al Jazeera. Her employer says she was assassinated in cold blood by Israeli forces, citing eyewitness accounts from her crew, while Israel's defense minister saying it's still unclear if she was killed by an Israeli or Palestinian. Israel's military releasing footage of a fierce firefight, but no firm evidence who fired the fatal shot.
This is Shireen Abu Akleh's final journey to the Al Jazeera Bureau, where she covered the story of the Palestinian people for so many years. You can feel the anger and grief of her colleagues everywhere.
Israel's military promising an investigation, but Palestinians have little faith it'll get to the truth.
We have no confidence in the judiciary or in the military investigations.
Israeli forces have been conducting near daily raids in the West Bank following multiple deadly attacks by Palestinian militants. 3 Israeli civilians killed just last week, allegedly by Palestinians wielding an axe. But the raids also leaving Palestinians dead and violence around Jerusalem's most sensitive holy site.
The Palestinian Authority is planning an official funeral for Shireen Abu Akleh here in Ramallah, followed by a family funeral in her native Jerusalem. And this all coming just a few weeks before President Biden is due to make his first official visit to Israel since taking office.
All right, Raf, thank you so much. Coming up, how Reddit changed Wall Street.
When we come back, we'll talk about a new film that details last year's stunning GameStop stock surge and the characters who helped make it happen. You are watching Morning News Now.
Welcome back. The latest economic numbers show inflation is still running hot, and Wall Street is looking to rebound today from yesterday's sell-off.
Yeah, CNBC's Silvana Hanau joins us now with that and more. Hey, good morning, Silvana.
Hey guys, good morning. So Wall Street, it could actually feel more pressure today following yesterday's inflation-fueled sell-off.
The Nasdaq is now at its lowest level since November 2020 and is down nearly 30% from its record high. Apple and Microsoft accounting for a third of the Nasdaq losses yesterday. In focus today, reports on unemployment and producer prices. That data is expected to show the cost to manufacture goods eased in April from the previous month. Apple loses its crown as the world's most valuable company to oil giant Saudi Aramco. Its market valuation is just under $2.43 trillion, while Apple's is now $2.35 trillion after the stock fell more than 5% yesterday. Energy stocks have been surging as oil prices jump amid tight global supplies amid the war in Ukraine, while tech stocks have tumbled. Apple has dropped about 20% since its record high in early January. Meanwhile, Apple announced on Tuesday it was discontinuing the iPod Touch, and now the device is completely sold out in the U.S. online store. The final version of the Touch was available in 6 colors, and customers could choose up to 256 gigabytes of storage, but now all of those are gone. You can still search and find one at Apple retail stores or on Amazon or on eBay, guys.
Silvana, I got one more place you can find one. Savannah's dad says she's got one in his attic.
Yeah,
so
yesterday he was watching the show. I said, I got to dig my pink one out. I got a text. That means I need to get it from the attic.
Yeah. So
there's one out there. I'll get a text about this shortly.
Hold on to it. I can't believe I've never done that before. Savannah.
I know, it is funny, yeah.
Keep it straight. Keep it straight. Savannah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, it's been nearly a year and a half since Reddit took over Wall Street. Now, the story around the GameStop stock is being profiled in a new film. Got to say that
5 times fast. The 90s era mall-based retailer stock price skyrocketed. You remember this was early 2021. Users on the Reddit forum Wall Street Bets, they coordinated trades and they managed to push the stock price way up, with shares soaring 1,700% at one point, making millionaires. The film Diamond Hands, it is the legend of Wall Street Bets. It's produced by NBC News Studios and ZCDC Films. It shows how the internet took the stock market by storm. Take a look.
The ape is the unsophisticated investor. You can go to Wall Street Bets, tell them that you're going to buy shares of a dying company, and you will receive accolades.
At this point, I really still had not a single amount of technical analysis or able to do anything like that in the stock market. But I knew, buy low, sell high. My name is Kirsten and I am Stonk Queen. So I'm learning all these different things, and it's buy AMC, buy BlackBerry, buy Bet Bath & Beyond. And it's popping.
It's popping.
One of the people featured in that film that you just saw right there is with us this morning. Alicia B. Woods, thanks for joining us. We've got a lot of questions for you on this one. So first, just take us back. It's early 2021. You're on Reddit. I want to know, were you always on Wall Street Bets? Did you know about this? You see this conversation. You see GameStop stock surging. What's your first thought, and what made you decide actually to pull the trigger and invest? It's kind of scary to put your money into it.
Honestly, it was January. I was looking into figuring out how to get a tax refund, and I had just gotten a stimulus. And I was just looking at stocks because the stock market was just going crazy. And I was just comparing them, and I noticed that GameStop just kept going up and up and up. And my focus is if I can make 120 off of 100, I'm not crazy, but little things add up. So I was like, you know what? Okay, GameStop, what's going on? And that's when I started diving to the Wall Street Bets world. And that's when it was AMC, BlackBerry, Nokia, Naked Juice, and all the numbers were just exploding. So I was like, hey, if something's $5 and it's $7 the next day, let's go.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, what goes up comes down, so it's a risk, obviously. But you talked about that. GameStop, it was AMC movie theaters, BlackBerry. Overall, how much did you make? And would you recommend this strategy? Do you think it's going to happen again?
It is happening again. Right now, the market did dip a little bit. For me, the saying is, don't trip by the dip. But personally, I did.
That's a gem.
We need that on a sweatshirt.
Right? So personally, I did not make a profit. What I profited in was learning. If you see someone named Jeff Amazon and he does technical analysis, you see it in the movie and he is analyzing every single data point. He has money that goes from here to here and it explodes. For me right now, I'm doing long term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk. By the way, I just wrote down "Don't trip by the dip" because I can't wait to say that to my fiance later, who's like in the stock world. He's going to be like, "What?"
This is not financial advice.
Okay,
Every single YouTuber.
Yeah, exactly. That was a good impression. Okay, let's talk now about this film. So this whole documentary is coming out on this Diamond Hands. I mean, what was it like to kind of relive this, to go through it again? And what's it like hearing from other Reddit users who also were on this sort of wild ride that you were on too? Tell us about making this film.
It was so surreal. I'm actually about to go serve some tables after I do this interview. And that's how I met the directors.
Wow.
I was at my place in Williamsburg when my old boss said, she's like, hey, like, will you help me out? So I was doing it and they were talking about crypto and I talked to people. So I got in, then he started talking about this and that. And he's like, listen, I actually work for NBC. I'm doing a documentary. Do you want to be in it? This is a Thursday. I was like, when? He's like, Saturday. I'm like, sold.
Oh my gosh.
And now I'm here. So but it was doing that experience that led to that moment. But if I could do it again, I would do it in a heartbeat. My only thing is learn how to take profit, learn how to sell. It's all learning curves for me.
So on that note, Alicia, I mean, I'm curious, what kind of advice would you give to people based on, you actually lost money, right? Like that's what you were saying. So what is it that you hope people take away from your experience and lessons that you would like them to learn?
Especially when somebody hears this story bringing up again, and they're like, oh, wait, it's a possibility to make millions? What should people know?
I think it's, don't try to get rich quick. Okay. So that's what I'm taking away that's what I'm taking away right now. But for me, it's anything and everything that can hedge against inflation. You know, so people are like, oh, you lost money in that. I'm like, I'm losing money on 8% while I'm just living right now. So for me, these are just the learning curves. I got to mention it. I'm obsessed with crypto. I'm buying crypto. You have to put it into assets that will appreciate over time.
Yeah, you are
another risky one, though.
Right. Yeah,
Alicia, what a vibe.
Hey.
You're not scared to jump back into it, and you're right. I think long-term investing, when the experts talk about it, you don't want to try to get rich quick because usually it doesn't work out that way.
And don't trip by the dip. Love it. All right, Alicia B. Woods, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time this morning and your energy. Thanks for joining us. And Diamond Hands, if you're interested in this, Diamond Hands, The Legend of Wall Street Bets is an NBC News Studios and ZCDC film airing this Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. And then the next day, it'll be streaming on Peacock.
All right, coming up, the future of work.
Yeah, after the break, the CEO of Airbnb on how the pandemic has changed his company forever. That's up next on Morning News Now.
Barbie is releasing a new collection of dolls aimed at being more inclusive of all children. They include the first Barbie with behind-the-ear hearing aids, a Ken doll with vitiligo, and a doll with a prosthetic leg. Mattel says they worked actually with an audiologist to accurately represent the hearing aid. The company says it now has more than 175 dolls in its Fashionistas line that highlight a variety of skin tones, eye colors, body types, and disabilities. And of course, we couldn't talk about toys without showing you this. Fisher-Price has unveiled a Little People RuPaul figurines. I mean, how fierce are they? The company says the new set celebrates RuPaul's career and style. By the way, all of these toys can be purchased today, and I'm sure when I come home, I will be hearing it from my littlest, who's obsessed with dolls, Barbie dolls, wants all of them. I didn't know there were 175. Oh my gosh. Got a lot to go.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I interviewed RuPaul and took the best selfie of my life ever after because of being taught how to find the light and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Amazing. Love it. So great to see, though. Yeah, it really does matter, don't you think, for little kids to play with something that represents them?
Totally. Yeah. That's why those dolls that you can customize the hair color or do it, like, it really matters. It makes kids feel included.
Great to see. All right, now Airbnb is revamping its website to reflect life after the height of the pandemic. It's a major change for the company, which is rebounding after losing business during COVID lockdowns. NBC News senior business analyst Stephanie Rule spoke to the CEO about why he's brought in a permanent work-from-home policy and how everything changed for his company during the pandemic.
Well, what happened was people weren't traveling for business, they weren't crossing borders, and they weren't visiting tourist attractions. But they were locked in their house, sequestered, and some people are like, I need to get out of my house. And so they were getting in their cars, and they were traveling, say, within a tank of gas, and getting with friends, families, to Airbnbs where they were living and working. Suddenly, we weren't just a travel company because a fifth of our business was now longer than a month.
So you transformed your company because we were forced into work from home because of COVID.
Yes.
And now here we are at the next phase.
Yes.
And you're one of the first to say, we're not working from home for COVID anymore. We are working from home for good.
We're working from home. You can go to an office if you'd like. You can work in the United States. And if you're in New York City and you want to move to upstate New York, we're not going to lower your pay. We're not going to adjust it to the standard of living. And the reason why is I do think eventually within countries, wages for people working on laptops are going to start to converge. And if you are limiting your talent to a commuting radius, you're not going to have the best people because the best people will live everywhere.
Why do you think so many other CEOs are saying, yes, our company has learned to function with all these people remote, but we're not optimizing productivity? Why did they see something different from what you see?
The world has completely changed since 2019. And I don't think we can go back to 2019 any easier than to go back to 1950. Young companies are embracing remote work. They're embracing flexibility. This is where the world's going. If a company chooses not to embrace it, that's fine. But this is where the world's going to be 10 years from now.
But innovation, connection, you really see that happening while you're sitting in a living room in New York and somebody else is in Chicago?
We haven't been in the same room for 2 years. And last year, we made 150 upgrades to our app. While being distributed and remote, we made the biggest change to our product in 10 years and the biggest change to our customer service in 10 years. We did this all remote.
When the war broke out, you made a lot of serious moves and announcement in the region. Talk to us about what you've done and what's happening now.
We announced that Airbnb, in partnership with our host in Airbnb.org, would house 100,000 Ukraine refugees. To date, we've housed over 20,000 refugees, and we're just getting started. Something even more remarkable happened. People in our own community, on their own volition, started booking Airbnbs in Ukraine with hosts they never intended to stay with, just to give them relief aid. And over the course of a few weeks, I believe more than $20 million were sent to Ukraine. We didn't take any commission. And this just speaks to something. In a world of darkness, in a world of destruction, I think kindness still exists in this world. And if you don't believe that, all you have to do is look at our own data.
It sure does. Love is always the answer. Brian Chesky, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So interesting. Our thanks to Stephanie Rule for that report.
Yep, and that'll do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.